Thank you, Aditya and the group, for inviting me to this IEEE Young Professionals Affinity Group talk. First of all, good morning to you all and the participants. Um, I will be speaking on the relevance of innovation and research and how this leads to patenting and where are the critical things that young innovators need to look at. That will be the theme for the talk. And let me move to the outline, that is the setting for the presentation. I will be dealing with what is this, what we call innovation, what is the meaning of innovation, what are the different types of innovations that we are aware of, and what are the approaches. The critical aspect of innovation is the incubation of an innovation, and that is where you see the relevance of research and development. The products and processes that come out of research and development can have potential IP value. So I will touch upon the intellectual property aspects. What are the different types of IP? And particularly if you look at research institutions and industry, which is into manufacturing and services, one of the important forms of intellectual property is patent. So I will specifically deal with what patenting means to us and how we need to really inculcate the understanding of patents and seek value out of patents. So let me move on to the first part of the presentation, which is the aspect of innovation. What are the different types of innovations and what are the approaches? We all understand that fundamentally we are in a different type of a society now, because as you all are aware, we are in a communication revolution. The connectivity between people and things has been so rapid in these times, which has never been so, in the years and decades back. Therefore, information, knowledge, and processes, products have had a tremendous transformative value. There is also, therefore, due to this rapid need to communicate, rapid need to develop, a greater need to develop access to different utilities. It is also a context where today we see a kind of a, overlap of different knowledge domains. And earlier, you must have heard the word interdisciplinary. From interdisciplinary, we moved to multidisciplinary. And now we begin to look at the context of transdisciplinary knowledge. That is something which is unexpectedly linked to a particular area in terms of its value or the context in which we look at. The other important aspect that we also have realized is that today we see that it is the question of creating knowledge spaces. And yes, the word seems quite abstract, but then that is what is the relevance of it in terms of that we are now capturing different contexts in an overlapping area. Many of you might have realized that if you look at the traditional disciplines, where we look at maybe mechatronics, biotechnology, nanotechnology, we have somewhere they were very new at one point of time. Today they have become a common parlance. And today we are talking about advanced areas of technology development. And so the newer and newer the domains that arise, the greater is the challenge. One is the need for capturing the value out of that particular area. The other is making it relevant to the needs of the society. Therefore, the role of customization also has a big impact. So when we look at the entire space of technology development, we need to understand that it is actually a very complex process. Technology development is no longer limited to labs or to large setups or to even manufacturing industry. It is actually about making it very relevant to the context, relevant in terms of time, and also relevant in terms of the market. And that is where the challenge is in terms of understanding what is it that we are dealing with. So fundamentally, I think all of us agree that all of us are very creative. There is no one who is not creative. But the question that makes a difference between each individual is what is the creative quotient. So as we move into the higher disciplines, our creativity generally comes down. In the childhood time, you see that we are highly creative. As we move up, generally, if you speak, the creativity comes down. That is because maybe we are not utilizing certain knowledge space. Innovation is actually about utilizing such knowledge space. So if we really need to understand, what are the different factors that impact innovation, we need to appreciate, first of all, what is innovation. Innovation is actually the changes that happen to any particular development. And that development may be directed towards a process or a product. So whenever we use the word technological innovation, we mean that the innovation is achieved during using technological means. Now, there are obviously several factors that affect technological innovation. It is also relevant to understand that most of the time funding is the one that drives any particular area, a growth of a research in a particular area. Therefore, the policies and the programs, the schemes, those do affect technological innovation. The amount of investment into R&D in terms of the specific type of R&D, every R&D is different. A software industry has a different basis of working. A manufacturing industry has a different way of working. An R&D institute has a different way of working. Among the R&D institutions also, because of the theme areas that they may be focused on only particular domain, again the focus changes. A lot of factors are also determinant in terms of the type of technology and the infrastructure, because the solutions that we are looking at may need such interventions. So therefore, that is another factor that one needs to keep in mind. One important component, despite you having the technology or the infrastructure, you need the human intellect. And that is what is the human capital in terms of having a very a quality human resource to drive the innovation process. And obviously, no innovation can afford to keep business or market out of the picture, because whatever developments today we are looking at need to be generating value in terms of market. So when we talk about market, it could be the local need, it could be the global need. It can mean a small subset of a local need as well. So it is actually about, does innovation cater to any of those requirements? And yes, much of the time we also need to keep in mind that we also need the help of legal framework. Today, when you are looking at developing a product, the question is, if you need to bring it into the market, you need to understand, is it bound by a standard? Are the processes in compliance with the regulatory requirements? And then, of course, amongst this aspect of legal framework is where you find even the intellectual property framework. Intellectual property is sought on the newly developed products and process in order to create a space for the entity. It may be a research institution, it may be an industry. Further in the talk, I'll elaborate on the IP aspects. So let's move on into understanding what are the paradigm, what is the kind of paradigm that we are working with. All of you will be agreeing with me is that we have moved away from fundamental research to more and more of applied research. Because again, I told you about the transformative value and the need for development in terms of the demand. So therefore, you see more and more of applied research. Though fundamental research is also very important to drive innovation. There is also a shift of R&D focus. You see a lot of innovator awards, you see challenge grants. You are also noticing that there are a lot of hackathons, which were not the kind of a case which in the times that we studied and researched. We also find a greater linkage with industry. Interestingly, industry is now setting up large, campuses, their units in large campuses, because then industry does not need to invest into that kind of infrastructure or human capital and can leverage the institutional human capital and the infrastructure. So you see a greater connect between industry. So there are a lot of academia, industry linkages, collaborations, joint work, joint collaboration. All of these, what we see, has been quite rapid and more prevalent now. Today, I think all of us are aware of what is IP. That, I think, has been another tremendous progress. You also know that many institutions have created their own intellectual property cells. to support the process of the turning of innovations to inventions to IP. And there's also a lot of support from the government in terms of the filing of IP. Institutions are looking at increasing their patenting index, increasing the IP value from each organization. It is also very relevant to understand in this context that many of these are not only driven by institutional goals in order to achieve IP, they're also driven by national goals. So today we also have the Make in India program, the Skill India program. So one aspect of it is to look at the how Make in India can make a difference. So what is this entire aspect in relation to Make in India is that you design, develop, and produce the product in India, and that is the paradigm that we are looking at. So we want to really look at improving the indigenous base for manufacturing. You know that India is again a big giant in the case of software services, but are we so in the manufacturing segment? Not in all the manufacturing segments. Yes, in certain areas we have captured this space, but not in the case of all the other areas. So we are still dependent on a whole lot of import, specifically if you talk about medical devices and many other things, where we are heavily dependent on import. Today, we are also facing the challenge of the various international understandings which are actually also burdening India from actually not being able to leverage its own strength. So if we need to really look at leveraging the internal strength, we need to actually improve on manufacturing. We need to improve on the linkages in relation to industry to market. And so this is where I would believe the setting the context to the talk would be on we need to really fuel innovations in all our setups. And since we are talking more from the end of research, we need to we have a really very big R&D base in the country in the form of several institutions where a whole lot of human resource is being funded in several areas of research. So the question that we need to ask is how much of this we are able to translate into the intellectual property, how much of it are we making it relevant to society. So given that, we also need to understand therefore the innovation system. What is this innovation system and how it has changed and how it needs to be fostered. So if you ask someone from a management discipline, they would give you a whole lot of information on the different types of innovations, which are like autonomous innovations. Then there are systemic innovations, there are disruptive and induced innovation, and the different types, different dependent on the metric with which they are actually suggesting a type of innovation. But essentially, if you look at, there are two different types of innovations. One is autonomous and the other is induced. Autonomous innovations are the ones which come generally through creativity. They are not necessarily driven by a particular demand. In the process of unknowingly you're creating, and that's what is the general creativity. Now, induced innovations are the areas where you are told to actually innovate in a particular area. So it is driven by a specific objective. So as you see, we are moving more into the induced innovation area where we cannot afford the time to be looking at autonomous innovation area. We are actually driven by the objectives, driven by demand. So today a lot of R&D is dependent on what you say the induced invention area. That is, I'm very sure most of you have realized, you as students, you as researchers have realized that their objectives set very early in research, and they are fairly definite objectives, that these are the goals that need to be achieved. And so we are moving more and more into the induced innovation area. Not only that, it is no longer about individual research. It is actually about group research, network research, global research. So gone are the times when in our times when we were working in a lab and that was about it. We had some collaboration, but today the collaboration is a necessary requirement at every level. So institutional collaboration, network, global collaborations have become, so today it's actually about global manufacturing. So all of it doesn't happen at one place. You're making the component at one place, assembling it at another place, the product is sold at a completely different place. So this is the other change that we are seeing. And then Also the aspect of public private funding. This is again undergone a tremendous change, because uh, again, bringing you back to the need for the transformative value is very high. And so therefore the value addition that we can do to improve human life, to improve animal life, to improve plant life, has become a important paradigm. Now, I can give you the context of today. You are seeing the global race for the COVID-19 vaccine. You may have realized that today people are looking at various solutions. They're looking at stem cells, they're looking at vaccines, they're looking at antibodies, they're looking at drugs, new drugs, they're looking at repurposing the older drugs, and plasma therapy. So there are so many diverse ways in which people are trying to address the problem of, a solution for COVID-19. And that solution for COVID-19 has to be effective, it has to be safe, and it has to provide for a long-term health. And that is a big challenge. So given the entire technological base that already exists, given the amount of research that is already there, we are still having a gap. And that is the rapidity with which we need to really look at the technology development. And so the innovation system, understanding the innovation system is very important, because there are different partners in the innovation system. There's a researcher, then there is also a value capture that happens in relation to the innovation, and then there is also a further process in terms of translating the innovation to the actual value. So as you can see in this particular slide, these are the illustrative aspects of how we are impacted by the process of innovations, which are now actually products. It is at this stage I want to introduce the other term, which is invention. So the path from innovation to invention is where innovation are changes, but when the change represents something which can be transformed into something which is new and which is very significant, that is the place where we'll start talking about inventions. And if you really look at the definition under the law, invention is something which is new. It has to be non-obvious. That is, for a person of that area, it has to have surprising value. So imagine you give me a pen and I change the cap of the pen from blue to red. That is new, certainly, but it is quite obvious that a cap can be blue or red in color. So what is it that I have done by way of my research to improve value to that particular pen comes into the question of understanding the invention process. So innovations finally will lead to inventions where you have the value capture, and such inventions may be protected under the law in case they meet the requirements of the law, particularly if you're looking at patents and others. So these are examples that I'm showing you, which actually give you an instance of the different products that have come out, and they are from simpler to highly complex ones. So Post-it, which someone, which was an innovation, moved into an invention where a technology which was actually discarded became valuable for another need, and that is where you need to understand the value of capture of innovation. So a data that Spencer Silver generated, okay, where he was only developing weak polymers. He was not developing strong polymers at all. So in the market, if you realize that the need for strong polymers is growing by the day. But the question is there also a market for weak polymers? And that is where an intellectual property manager of 3M identified that, well, there may be a need for weak polymers. And today what you see Post-it is an excellent example of where you're actually capturing the value of innovation. So remember, I'm giving you this example just to indicate that no data is unnecessary. Every data has value. So tomorrow when you're actually striking off something in your research record notebook, don't strike it off completely. Just mark it with a single line strike. You never know, that record notebook may have value in future. So negative data also has value. Okay, so let me move on. You are now seeing in this slide the very common products, very highly technologically advanced products. They are all present in the market. But is it that we can easily replicate them? No, we cannot easily replicate them. Why? Because they're covered by intellectual property rights. Something like Lays, Mickey Mouse, you're seeing on the right panel a mobile phone, hair oil, then you're looking at an engine, and then of course you're looking at the entertainment and the toy segment. All of these are pervaded with intellectual property. So intellectual property has created a big niche for those who are developing new products and processes. And remember, it is relevant to all industry. It is not about low tech and high tech. You see the examples that are given here. It is relevant to industry across in the several domains. So one has to realize the value of intellectual property from that perspective. And why is it that we are talking about intellectual property? That we have innovation at hand and we are happy we have developed something. But in order to capture the market, you need to have what we say monopoly. If you have monopoly, you can prevent the other manufacturer to be imitating or copying your own product. So given that scenario, we need to appreciate that intellectual property right provides you that market advantage. And this is where I would like to introduce the aspect of what are the different forms of intellectual property rights. There are different forms of intellectual property rights, like copyright, which is for one type of subject matter, literary works, artistic works. Patents are the ones which are relevant in relation to inventions, that is, those which are providing technological solutions for new processes and products. So if you look at the manufacturing industry is typically, looks at the aspects of patents, designs, and know-how. These are the three predominant forms of intellectual property which are relevant to any research institution and even to an industry. So, of course, there are other different types of intellectual property rights. For instance, if a farmer has developed a variety through ages and has been consciously breeding that can become a farmer variety because the farmer is developing the new variety. Similarly, breeders are consciously breeding, new varieties for an improved color, maybe improved weight, improved grain. So those kind of things come under the purview of plant variety protection. Now, the area of semiconductors also has a lot of development. So those come under the purview of semiconductor protection. Now, all these products are known by certain names, are known by certain words that are used on these products. Those become the trademark. And sometimes it is about the overall appearance of a particular product. So that becomes the trade dress. So what you're seeing in this as a Barbie doll or a Mickey Mouse kind of thing, or even a mobile cover or a mobile shape, all of that is actually kind of a trade dress. So there are different forms of intellectual property. And today, it is not only that we need to understand what is the value of patents or designs. You may have a patent, you may have a product, but if you do not capture the name of that particular product, someone else may put another name and actually sell it off into the market. So to prevent counterfeit, to prevent imitation, we also need to safeguard utilizing other different types of intellectual property rights. So I won't dwell much into the other forms of intellectual property. I will be restricting my talk in relation to patents as we move on. So yes, we talked about what is innovation and understood where innovation takes shape. Now we need to really critically understand the in-depth process of what are the different steps of innovation and how do we embark on that particular process. So if we need to simply put what is innovation and how is it driven as a process, it comes into the paradigm of what you call the problem solution approach. That is, whenever we are looking at any particular research, the first thing that we need to understand is, are we addressing a problem? If we are addressing a problem, what kind of solutions are required in that particular area? Is it that, I need to look at developing a particular process for it or a product for it or even both? So what are the solutions? So if you understand what is the problem and what is the solution, you are actually on the path of what we call innovating. But is it that simple? It's not that simple because it means that there's a lot of iterative process. There's a lot of application of human intellect. There's also an experimenting process. Generally, in the area of law, we call this the inventive step. What is the inventive step? The inventive step is a step that actually determines what kind of problems are addressed in the available area in order to develop solutions. So, a simpler understanding of it is this. Now, as we move on, I'll elaborate a little detail on those aspects. So, once we understand that there is a need for a development of a solution, it is at that stage we look at the experimentation process. Now, one question that I have for all of your participants is that how many of you have engaged in patent search before you started experiments? Generally, all of us, I think, would agree that we do literature search. We look at different journals in our own space, dependent on which type of engineering discipline you are or science discipline you are. But how many of us really embark on patent search? Because remember, patent search is that important component. And generally, not many researchers apply patent search also before they embark on research. So patents are also literature. Just like you have journal articles, reports, review articles, patent data is also literature data. If we are talking about solutions which are already taken as intellectual property, then we need to really look at that data as well. So the importance of patent search must be understood in the early process of research. So you as a student who has done a BTP, you as a student who has done an MTP, an MTech thesis project, you as a young researcher who is going to be giving your registration seminar in a particular area, the question that we need to address is, have we maybe missed out already the solutions that are available as patents or available as design rights? If that is the case, you're doing nothing but reinventing the wheel. So therefore, I would urge all researchers, all students, I mean, catch it young, they say, right? So our BTech students are highly innovative. We need to really understand that when we are actually at the stage of a BTP project, we also need to appreciate the relevance of patent search. So before you embark on, defining the problem for a particular research area, identify maybe it's already done, just not by literature. Maybe the solution is available already as a patent. If that is the case, then you can actually change your research area to the next solution. The patent may have addressed only one part of the solution, right? So you can actually now move on and say, well, patent is addressing only part of the problem. I will now move on beyond this patent and try to define a new innovation path. That is where we need to really improve on what we say the innovation index. Remember, all countries are actually indexed as per the global innovation index. Again, based on the innovative ability. And patents are one indicator for such innovation index. So the strength of R&D is also dependent not only on publications, it is also dependent on the number of patents that you have and the number of patents that are transferred are generating value out of it. So we need to really look at this value capture in form of patents as well, just not publications, right? So this is where I want you to emphasize that in the early experimentation phase, please include patent search in your design so that we do not end up reinventing the wheel. If we want Make in India to be successful going forward, we need to, as the messages come, that we need to look at indigenous development. And indigenous development should be in compliance with intellectual property. So it is not that you are remaking the same design and the design is already taken as a right in India, in which case you'll be infringing on the IP. So we need to safeguard that we are not infringing on the IP. At the same time, we are generating new IP. If we need to generate new IP, we need to understand whether the IP is already there in the area or not for it. Okay, so this I think I want to highlight at the very early experimentation phase. So once we clear that step, so we really are on the path of identifying, yes, now we are at a problem which needs a solution in the form of a new process or a product or both. And yes, a series of experimentation happens. There are a lot of trials, there's a lot of vetting out, there's a lot of validation. And that is the stage when you come up with what we call the prototype. That is, yes, you have addressed the problem, you have reached closer to the solution. All right, and that solution is a lab scale solution. Whenever you come with this lab scale solution where you are showing what we call the proof of concept, we say that you have arrived at the prototype. Now, from the prototype, we need to now look at customizing the prototype to the needs of the market or the needs of the industry. And that is where is the critical step for value capture of IP. So many researchers come to us and say, look, madam, we have made this invention, our product is ready, our process is ready. So what is the critical step to go for IP filing? We first look for whether there is a proof of concept or not in that work. The moment we identify that, yes, there is a proof of concept, we immediately initiate at least a provisional filing. Okay, so I hope you understand this aspect of it. And then this is the stage where there are two choices. Suppose today you need a solution for COVID. All right, a particular type of solution. Either it may not be the drug only, it may also need be about a healthcare equipment. And suppose, let us say that it needs immediate deployment. So there are two routes available to you. So suppose, let us say the industry is just ready and the next day it needs it. You can simply transfer the technology through an agreement. Suppose there is a wait time, that there are no takers, then you can also look at the other route of filing for IP. You can do both also. You can transfer the IP by just simply filing a provisional filing. You can go for a provisional IP. That is, you can file a patent application, and then that patent application number, you can write it in the agreement and transfer your technology. So which are the choices that you would take up, whether you will go for a direct technology transfer or you would like to go for an IP initial filing and then go for technology transfer, are dependent on the circumstances. Generally, we prefer that at least a provisional should be filed and then the technology should be transferred. So that, suppose, let us say, through the value chain, someone violates the IP. It's a long drawn process. You don't want to end up in courts. And anyway, the technology is out. So therefore, to safeguard, at least you need to go for an initial provisional filing. Okay, let me move on as we discuss the process further. So in this entire process, is it so simple? It's not so simple, because you're starting from research, innovation, and research, and then you're moving into the area of looking at patenting, or even, let us say, general IP value. So one key component which is relevant for all manufacturing and research setups, whether they are industry or they are institutions, is building novelty in research work. I already touched upon the early phase of research. One needs to know whether your work is novel or not. And the more the novelty, the better it is in terms of later capture of the IP value. I talked to you about patent search. The obvious question that would come to your mind is where to search for patents. At least some of the databases that are available publicly, one can actually search for patents. And remember, patents are territorial in nature. They're jurisdiction specific. So if I have a patent in India, it doesn't mean I automatically have a patent in the US. I have to go for the filing in the US and a grant in the US in order to have an enforcement there. Okay, so the existing patent literature in India, you can go to the ipindia.nic.in, which is the Indian patent database, and put the keywords and identify that, yes, is your solution that you're looking at already there in the patents. Similarly, you can go to the European Patent Office website. You can go to the USPTO for the US patents. You can go to the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO database in order to look at patents in relation to the published applications in relation to the worldwide. So the WIPO also offers what we call the international patent publications, and that you can actually get from that particular route. So inculcating the value of patents search in your research work is fundamental. This typically happens in the industry, and I would believe, I am at least not aware of there is any work in the higher education institutions which actually draws metrics in this area. It would be good to know how many of the higher education institutions in India are actually doing the patent search at a very early phase. An empirical work will give us, the information on how many of them actually have inculcated this practice. The other thing which is important is the documentation of IP. I'll come to that a little later. Now, so therefore, differentiating the proposed work from an existing patent is very necessary, in relation to the research. All of this has to be in a time-bound manner. So it is not that you are given, 3 months time to complete your patent search and then differentiate your work. We are all in a time-bound program. All of you must be realizing who are working on BTPs, MTPs, or even who are working in the area of research. Gone are the days when we used to research for at least a minimum of 4 or 5 years, and then only we used to get our PhD. Today, 3 years is the timeline, because the transformative value is very high. We can't afford to be researching forever. So, because of a time-bound activity, this becomes a very complex process. The other important thing is, wherever there is external participation, we need to understand concerns in relation to IP, that is IP compliance. I had an inventor coming to me after the entire process of their due diligence. All of it was done. The provisional was going to be filed. It is at that stage the inventor told me that the inventor had worked for an internship in another higher educational institution. So immediately it flagged to me the concern that is there a leakage of IP? That is, during the internship, was this work already covered? What is the participation of that particular organization in relation to the invention? So these become very important in terms of looking at IP compliance. Where are the external participation, and where is there a need for sharing of IP in this case? One needs to also know through the entire process of research. And remember, it is just not in the early stage of research that you need to be looking at patent search. Even through the product development, we need to be very clear. It is maybe at the initial stage you missed a patent, but today, once you have the prototype, you may have realized that someone else has already gone for a IP filing or a patent filing, in which case you're stuck. All that development you did just to note that today someone has already filed an IP and taken a grant, in which case you can no longer go for the IP filing. And moreover, suppose, let us say you actually bring the product into the market, immediately you will be sent a notice saying that, look, I have a patent grant in India and you are infringing on my IP. So therefore, the search for patents has to continue through the entire process. Okay, now let's come to the documentation of IP. So we have now become very IP aware, and we understand the value of IP compliance. We need to be careful. Given that process, there is a clear need for documentation of research. In IIT Kharagpur, we have what we call the maintenance of research records and data entry. It's a guideline that is available, and as a part of that guideline, a research record notebook is available for all researchers to record the research information. And that is what is called the record notebook keeping practice, which is highly prevalent in the industry. And many organizations in the research institutions also do follow, but it is not, I would say, there's nothing called a 100% compliance. The question that I have for young students and researchers is, how many of you maintain a formal record notebook? It is very important, because you leave the lab, the next person joins in. We again don't want the reinventing of the wheel. So if someone has to take forward your area, where is the recording of what is done? And given the rapidity with which we are needing to develop technology, we cannot depend on the word of mouth. In the lab, we can't be asking someone and saying, okay, how much of work is done? We need a recording of that. That would enable the next researcher to know where not to focus on, and maybe even where to focus on. I mentioned to you about negative data. That data came out because there was a record notebook keeping practice in that industry. That negative data has become an important IP going forward. All of us use Post-it, right? We're paying for it. Well, so therefore, that is one important step. Now, recording of notebook is also important to prevent unauthorized disclosure of IP information. That is also very important, because remember that IP value is very high in relation to research. Today, researchers are moving across the globe. You're carrying your information, but are you sure that someone is not copied your information? There are already a lot of copyright compliance that we talk about. There are, sometimes we do see violations in relation to copying of data, research data. And where is all this coming? That is because of the unauthorized disclosure of IP. So safeguarding that IP is important. Remember, in the industry, record notebooks are kept in a safe. That is the value of a IP. So recognizing that is also obviously important. And yes, today it's very, very heartening to see young students, as entrepreneurs who are actually just completed their BTech or MTech and have taken the challenge of, being entrepreneurs. It's a very brave thing. I can't imagine, in our days, something like that was never there. So that is a completely different dimension. Now, in order for you to become a good entrepreneur, you have to first have your own safeguards. The products and processes that you have developed, are they safe? Or are you allowing someone to come into your territory and take away a piece of land? It's almost like that. You have a property, but you're not safeguarding your property by putting a fence. So intellectual property provides you that kind of a fence, so that people do not pirate your information, people do not copy your information. So in the process of entrepreneurship also today, IP value is realized. Today we see small medium industry, MSMEs also looking at clearly generating IP and also filing and taking IP. Okay, now let's move on into the area of patents. So this is where I would like to bring the context of inventions. So patents are given to inventions, and inventions are technology specific. Now there are requirements in relation to inventions which will fulfill the criteria for patenting. So typically, if you look at an R&D, as I mentioned to you, patents are one predominant type of IP, designs, and then of course we have what we call the know-how. So I may have your product, but suppose let us say I have to manufacture it. I need the technical know-how in terms of manufacturing the product. So know-how is also very important. So typically what we see is in the area of patenting, we see that the value capture is in relation to processes, products, or both, or even in the area of software, we see also systems being taken. Now, in the area of mobile applications, every mobile application, can it be patentable? Yes, it can be. It can be. So, patents can come from multidisciplinary areas. So, patents are given to inventions, and inventions are technology specific. So, suppose let us say I want to know whether for this invention I can get a patent or not. What is the lens with which I'll be looking at? I'll be looking at from the lens of patent law. And I told you patent law is jurisdiction specific. So for instance, if I need to take a patent in India, I will be coming under the purview of the Patents Act 1970. And the criteria are laid down for what are the aspects that will help qualify an invention for the patenting process. So quickly, I'll move on to the later part of my presentation. I know we are almost completing, another 5 minutes, we'll be completing an hour. So whenever you embark on an invention, you are developing something beyond the existing knowledge. That existing knowledge is nothing but what is called the prior art, which you see in the left side of this particular slide. So whenever we develop the invention beyond the prior art, the first fundamental question that comes in, is your invention new over what is already known? And that is where we come to the context of what we call novelty. And what you see as this animation is that novelty will be there wherever there is no identity. What it means is, if the process or the product that you have developed is exactly there already, then your invention is no longer novel. That means identically, if it is there in one single publication, in one single patent, then identity is destroyed. Identity is met, and therefore novelty is destroyed. So therefore, being the first criteria is novelty. And then comes the next criteria. Whatever you have achieved new, is it so obvious to make? I mentioned to you about the change of the pen cap from red to blue, or blue to red, whichever way. So is it that so simple that anyone can envisage and make the color change? So how do you do that? The law prescribes that obviousness will be achieved if there are a combination of the prior arts that can be utilized. So for novelty, it is identity. That means you are looking only at one single place. You can only access one single place. That is, either it is publicly available as such in one journal publication or in one patent. There are other aspects as well, but it is about one to one. Whereas obviousness is about one to many. So let us imagine that, yeah, your invention is new, fine. There is no single publication which exactly is identical to yours. Very good, you are at a nice place, your invention is novel. But the question is that suppose I combine one patent, one publication, and some other report, and together I'm still able to come to your product, then it means that someone has tried in different parts. Someone has worked on one part, the other person has worked on other part. If I combine all of that, again I'm able to get your invention. That means such novelty that you achieved is quite obvious. So this is the second aspect that needs to be, met, which is what we call non-obviousness. That means even to a person who is skilled in that particular area, for instance, for in the mechanical engineering area, mechanical engineer, in the electrical engineer, and electrical engineer, to them, what does it sound? Well, this is fairly worked, it's nothing so unusual, it is not so surprising. If a researcher feels like that, then it means it is obvious. If a researcher finds that, well, I know that there is some work done, but then it is very interesting that this invention is doing something totally different. It is doing something totally surprising, something unenvisaged. Then yes, you have actually crossed that step, and yes, your invention is non-obvious. And remember, every invention must have some utility. I'll move on quickly. So I put the definition of inventive step for your understanding, but all it means, to put it simply to you, India has two different criteria that it applies for achieving this aspect of inventive step. That is, either the invention is representing a technological advance, or it may not be technologically advanced, but you have actually customized it and therefore have made the invention relevant to the market. I have a cup, now I made the cup biodegradable. Fair enough. The cup is very well known, shape is very well known, but I have made it using biodegradable material. Such an invention is of value to the market because we want environmentally sound technologies. And then, of course, I've given you other examples there, that suppose, let us say, a manufacturing process takes 4 steps, and you have now brought it down to 3 steps by working it out. That is going to be saving a lot of time for them in the industry, a lot of costs, maybe even manpower. So those inventions come under what we call economic significance, which is laid out in the inventive step definition. I'll not go into much detail and move on. So that is one part of it. So there is something called the criteria, where you have to meet the novelty, you have to meet the non-obviousness requirement. Every invention has to have utility, that is what the Act says, capable of industrial application. And yes, first of all, is it eligible subject matter? I didn't touch upon that. So all of this is very good, but it's going to really, an invention that you made is going to have create a lot of public nuisance, is against public order. Such inventions, even if they are novel, will not be granted patents. So therefore, the other aspect is, there are many in the restrictions imposed under the Patent Act, which starts from 3A to 3P. That is half of the English alphabets, 3A to 3P, are defining what are restricted under the Patent Act, what are not eligible for patents. So in India, you cannot take software per se, but if you create an application out of it, yes, that is patentable. Traditional knowledge is not patentable, but derived out of traditional knowledge is patentable. Again, method of agriculture is not patentable because agriculture is the mainstay. But if you create a device out of agriculture, which can be used for agriculture, that is patentable. So therefore, one must understand exactly where the eligibility criteria are. The next thing is actually all of this has to be written in a document. Remember your property document. Property document is not like just, you go to for registering property, someone announces and says that, well, this is your property. There is a clear documentation. You say that these are the metes and bounds of my property. Same thing here. Patent is also a property. So if you say that on the invention, you're claiming property, you have to describe the invention. And that is all about what we call the disclosure norms. So a patent has to be described in particular, and distinctly you have to claim the subject matter. So therefore, a written description has to be given, which will clearly tell us what is the invention. You must also give the working of the invention. You can't hide the invention and say, I will take 20 years monopoly on the invention, right? So you have to enable, that is, you have to give the method of working of the invention. You also must not hide the best mode. Well, you are telling everyone that this is the method of operation, but then you are hiding some information that if I turn this switch, that is the critical step. And if you hide that, the invention is no longer publicly useful. Therefore, without hiding, without concealing all that information, you have to give it. And that amounts to what you call the best move. So, is there property in patent? Yes, there is property in patent. Is patent tangible right? Yes, you're saying the patent document. But the value is intangible. And so, therefore, patent is also intangible right that way, because the value proposition is much higher than the general property. Right. Okay. So, this is something that you must keep in mind. I've just given you the notion of that in a descriptive way, that you have to give the written description. Enablement, suppose you're making a dish. Okay. If you don't exactly tell how you're making the dish, everyone will be clueless, including you should say that I've added this particular ingredient. It may completely change into another dish. So, therefore, keeping these requirements are very important. And these are the fundamental requirements that we need to know in order to proceed for the process of patenting. Well, the area of patents is the space where you need the expertise of the techno-legal space. Patents are techno-legal documents highly rich in matters of fact which come from the technical discipline and on which you are applying law. So fundamentally, if you do not understand the technology, there is no question of application of the law appropriately. We may be knowing the law, but if you do not appropriately apply the law on that particular matter of fact, you may not be deciphering the invention, or the value of the invention as it goes forward in the patenting law. So therefore, this is another important space where it needs people from very important techno-legal space. So interdisciplinary knowledge is always very useful in the area of patents. So all those designations that you talk about, patent managers, patent associates, intellectual property managers, if they have this techno-legal understanding, it's always relevant. It's always useful. Okay, so this slide I'll be moving towards the end of my presentation now in the last couple of slides. So patenting is happening in different areas, and it is becoming more and more multidisciplinary. Therefore, the complexity is increasing in terms of how we decipher each of these criteria in relation to patenting. Obviously, the disclosure norms are also changing. Interestingly, this is one area where you have guidelines for biotechnology, you have guidelines for pharmaceuticals, you have guidelines for traditional knowledge area, you have guidelines for stem cell patenting, all of these. So, because it is ridden with so many different technical issues, we are having to look at different guidelines. Courts are also having a lot of difficulty in terms of addressing and resolving issues in relation to multidisciplinary areas, because it needs a gentle understanding of all of that. And obviously, expert evidence, documentary evidence, sometimes even invention in the working is necessary, at various stages of patent prosecution, whether it is a hearing at the patent office or even when the matter is taken up by courts. So I just wanted to bring to your attention that we are seeing now a greater complexity when we talk about inventions in the multidisciplinary areas. And let me tell you, for many of us who are into looking at the very first step of patentability search, which now takes you to the next step of IP filing, that is a very critical step. And there we have a lot of inventor sittings, because it is important for us to understand what was the imperative with which the inventor developed the invention. So after a lot of deliberations, we actually come to the step of deciding for the IP filing. All right. So every institution has an invention disclosure form. I only wanted to bring this to your attention to indicate to you that once you're ready with your document, you need to formally look at the entry of information. And this disclosure form helps you in the various stages to represent your information on how you felt the invention is novel. Why do you think the invention is not obvious? What is the value in terms of a possible commercialization of your invention? Okay, this is almost like the last slide of my presentation. So once you clear the institutional phase, or let us say the IP cell phase, then that is the stage where the patent filing would have happened. Now, the patent filing is done at the patent office. Now, the patent office takes up the prosecution of that particular invention, where the steps of the publication happen, and then the examination. And of course, it goes to eventually either it is approved or it is not approved. Why? Because it is approved if it is meeting the requirements of the law. It is not approved if it is not meeting the requirements of the law. So remember that it is a cost intensive process, and it also goes through several stages. So planning for patents is also very important. So understanding the value of patents at a very early stage of R&D is necessary. Not only that, today you have your IP cells, you have your technology transfer offices. Being in touch with them is important. Understanding through them how what are the difficulties inventors face will help you really pitch your work, in a better way. Also will reduce the number of steps that you would actually need to face, in terms of translating your invention to potential IP for IP filing. I think this has been a very, I should say, a very small deliberation, but I have some take home for all of you. Is that the first fundamental thing, even before we talk about IP, is clearly understanding the innovation process and what is the value generation we are aiming at. Documentation of IP. Here I mean the potential IP. That's not just that is the background data, the research is very important, because that is where you will later on, that data is important later on for you to sieve out and go for the IP filing. Importance of patent search is very necessary for every R&D and institution to leverage, the value of novelty of work. Today, we see more and more of, innovation to IP to entrepreneurship being usual now. And so therefore, appreciating the process of innovation, understanding of the process of IP is very important for an entrepreneur to really, get a good, make good business and also stay in the market. R&Ds have to keep in mind that patents are the ones that drive the entire R&D in terms of value for themselves as well as value for others. And so fast tracking the patenting process, improving on the innovation capture, these are things which actually are going to define difference between one R&D to the other. And you as a group, IEEE Young Professionals Group, have a very important role of disseminating, the value of capture of innovations to every new student who joins the institution, making them aware of what are patents, making them aware of, do they do patent search? Do they sometimes look for patents? Suppose, let us say there's a product in the market and you want to use those keywords and look for patents. So patent search is like another hobby. The more you look at patents, the more you develop, the more you understand them, and the more you can become innovative. There are gaps in patents which can become the next innovation. Okay, so I wish all of you very well in these difficult times, and it's been a pleasure talking to all of you. We are offering a course on the NPTEL, which is patent search for engineers and lawyers, with this very purpose that to really fuel the process of innovation, we need to inculcate the understanding of patent search and also get into patent search at a very early stage. Thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, I will take them.
Yeah. Thank you, madam, for your wonderful talk. We have a few questions. I think some of them you have already covered in your presentation. I think first few questions related to how do we know our work is patentable, and some questions regarding how to search a patent and what are the websites for the patent search. You already shown in some of your slides. And one more question related to the patent only. Can we patent any already published work, or after patenting we should go for publication? And patenting is time consuming as well. That may delay the research progress. How to tackle this issue?
Yeah. In fact, this often is a problem that every researcher faces. Many inventors come to us with this problem. I'll illustrate that with an example. There is an inventor who came to us saying that, well, they've submitted the thesis, and before processing the formalities of the PhD thesis, they want to go ahead with the patenting. But then, since it is taking time, they also have a few publications which are pending, and they want, what should they do? Should they go for patenting or should they go for publication? Now, the question is very simple. The analysis is very simple. Publication process will tend to destroy the novelty of an invention, though there are safeguards in the law. Okay, that is what I want to start with. Generally, it is better you go for a provisional IP filing. That is, for a provisional patent, there is minimal information that is required. You don't need to go into elaborate details of drafting the claims and filing the complete disclosure. Since the prototype is ready, since the notion of the product is ready, or the process is ready, which you have developed, you know that it works, one working is at least ready, go for the provisional filing. Okay, that is my suggestion. Now, after you go for the provisional filing, you have a filing date obtained from the patent office. Next day, you can go and submit the paper. Okay. Now, there are also cases which we come across where people have published the work and then come to us saying that, look, we want to patent it. Okay. Then the important question that comes in is that many countries do offer what is called the grace period. That is, within 1 year of the publication, you can actually go for the you can actually use the safeguard available in the law wherever the patenting process, where you can actually initiate that. But then it is an arduous task because there's already a public disclosure available in terms of a publication. The question that I explained to you about identity, those things can come into picture. And generally, remember, you may be taking the safeguard under the law and proceed with the IP filing. Okay. But remember, since you have disclosed this information to the outside world, people are already aware and working on it. Okay. Now, you may get delayed in the IP process. Something else may happen, which may have, which you could not have proceeded with. So, the best thing would be is to go for a provisional filing. Next day, you go and submit your journal paper. We generally always prefer that route. And of course, there are certain cases where people have published the information in March, and in July, the inventor has come to us saying that, look, this is my publication and I want to patent it. Well, there are safeguards available under the law, but generally we do not like to use that route, is all I can tell you. So go for a provisional filing, next day submit it into the journal. So catch hold of the IP cell, move to them, and impress upon them that this is my invention, has to go to the provisional filing. After that, you submit it to the journal. You yourself can declare it even in any public space. That will not destroy the novelty of your work. Because there's also a concept called self-anticipation. Though this 1 year safeguard period is there, we do come across inventions where that 1 year time has also lapsed. Okay, let us say by few months. In that case, a case of self-anticipation will arise. That is, you yourself have disclosed it in the earlier time. Same thing, you're coming forward with a patent. So your own publication will destroy the novelty of your invention. So these nuances are there. So sum and substance, go for a provisional filing. Next day, publish in a journal, publish in a transaction, go for a proceedings, give a talk, anything is fine. Okay, but after the provisional filing, because securing the novelty is important.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for one more question. If there is an existing product in the market, either it may be a software or hardware, and if we take it as an improvement, right, a crucial improvement in it, and can we eligible for the patent again on that?
Okay. Yeah. The question is, you may modify the invention. Okay. You may modify the product. The first thing that you need to remember is that, is the product covered by IP? If the product is covered by IP, you may be infringing on that particular product. Because suppose the component that is there in that is covered by IP, and the modification of the IP that you're looking at is involving the making of that component in toto, then you're infringing on the IP. All that you can do is recreate that component totally new, in which case you will not be infringing on the IP. So there's a concept of which is called literal infringement of IP. Suppose, let us say the product, for the sake of your understanding, has 5 features. The product that you talked about in the market has 5 features. Okay. Now, and the modification that you're looking at is including those 5 features, and one of those features you are modifying it. The question that will arise is, are you literally infringing on the product? If you're not literally infringing on the product, which is on the IP, then you're actually developing a new invention. So the question is, what is the level of overlap that is there? So the novelty is again the consideration here. If the 5 features and you're making the same 5 features, then you're infringing clearly. Okay. Suppose your IP has something. The IP that you're developing has, let us say, 7 things, and you're substantially changing the entire one particular feature. Then you're actually moving away from that IP. You're not making the same IP, right? Then you're not infringing. So that needs to be understood. That are you literally infringing on that particular product or not?
Yes, ma'am. One more question was related to the names in the patent. While the product is going to patent, should we give only one name, or the entire team also we can give?
Okay. So here, is it when the team is involved, we must remember that are they inventors is the first question. Who is an inventor? The law tells us. An inventor is the one who has significantly contributed to the skill of the invention. Okay. In the case of the Patent Act, it says true and first inventor, it says, under the Indian Patent Act. It doesn't define who is a joint inventor. But if you look at the definition under the US patent law, joint inventor is someone who has significantly contributed to the skill of the invention. So what is your participation in the invention? That means every inventor must participate in the invention. That is the first criteria. Second thing is there adequate contribution? Okay, suppose you are all the inventors and I am your lab technician. All that you were doing is you're all working on the invention, and all I was doing is pouring gels for you. Okay, but I have no clue about the invention, in which case I'm not an inventor. I may be in your team, but I'm not working on your invention. I have not contributed to the intellect of or to the working of it, in which case I'm not inventor. So that is what is called inventor attribution. So there was a case where, in a case of an MS work, the professor came to us and said that, look, they are the 3 people, and I would like to let you know that this intern had come for some time and worked, but should I keep the name or not? Now the question is, did the intern contribute to the invention? And the contribution should be significant. Yeah, I hope you understand. And what is that? Did he contribute to the product, or did he contribute to the process? And what is the contribution? That is the reason why the documentation of IP is very important. So suppose, let us say there's a dispute in the court or even at the patent office on inventorship. The question that will come is, where is the evidence that you are the inventor? And that is, I hope you realize why I mentioned to you, documentation of research results is important. Suppose someone walks away with your inventor records, how long will it take for a person from the area? They can go and file the IP in their own name as inventors. Suppose you want to challenge them, how will you challenge? You can challenge when you have the documentation that I was the inventor. They stole my records and they filed for the IP. They are not the inventors. It was a theft of IP. Okay, so inventorship attribution means that which inventor, whether the inventor has participated. If the inventor has participated, what is the contribution to the invention? Now, if you move it into the area of patent law, when we teach patent drafting, the question that will arise is that, okay, there are 10 people in the patent as inventors. Okay, and there are, let us say, 20 claims. So what is the threshold in terms of law? If you say every inventor must have contributed to at least one claim of the patent, or at least part of the claim of the patent. That means, remember, patent is a property, right? So if the property in the patent is defined by the claims in the patent, the question that arises is that, has the inventor contributed to at least one claim of that particular patent, or at least part of the claim of that particular patent? Then yes, inventor's right is there on that particular patent. And that attribution, who does that? Your group head will do. Your inventor record will tell you whether you are inventor or not. This question I really appreciate it, because this is very relevant, because today we are working on network projects. Today we are working in global scenario. One inventor is in India, another inventor is in some other country. Inventor records are the only proof which will help you with respect to inventorship. So yes, and generally what we do is that we tell inventors very clearly that, remember, this is the threshold. So if an inventor has participated, do not discount their contribution. Keep their name as inventor, because tomorrow your patent grant may be challenged on this very note that the inventor name is not there. Okay, so this is an important question. Yes. I hope this is clear.
Yes, ma'am. I think another one was software is immeasurable works. For patent, should they submit the code or just executable part of the software?
Yeah, it is the application of the software. Code has no meaning for the patent in the patent document. You can say it is based on some program. That is just fine. Okay, but the application of it, what is it that you've developed utilizing the software? How have you defined that algorithm, or that algorithm to work to define a particular solution? Suppose, let us say you have today defined an algorithm, like for example, I can give you in current times, the mobile application that has been developed, Arogya Setu app. That app actually locates, who are the people who are, COVID sensitive in that region. Is that an invention? Yes, it is. Is it based on software? Yes, it is based on software, but it is not software per se. The application of it is what is the invention, not the software per se, because the law doesn't allow you, because it is not eligible subject matter. The software per se is a copyrightable subject matter, whereas the application of the software can be taken. So you have to actually look at the application of that particular software in the form of a process, in the form of a product. That is again possible as a patent.
Yes, ma'am. One more question. What to do after 1 year of provisional filing? Is a product covered under IP after 1 year of filing that provisional patent?
Is that product covered under IP, or is it covered under IP? Yeah. See, initially you do a provisional filing, and within the 12 months time you have to file the complete specification. Okay, so provisional filing is an early in the queue. Quickly you will like to go and stake the claim on the invention. That is, you want to create the what you call the notional aspect of it. That is when you go for provisional filing. But the law stipulates that within 12 months you must file the complete details of the invention, and that is called the complete specification filing. It is at that stage where you're telling the patent office that, look, I told you that my property looks like that. In the provisional stage, you're giving them a kind of an image of your property. Okay, a telescopic view of your property. But when you present it at the complete specification stage, you must exactly tell where your property is and what is the nature of your property. Okay, I'm just giving you in simple terms. That is where you're filing for the claims of the patent. So suppose, let's say you have a product or a process, you're filing that, okay, what is the nature of your process? What is the process that you're trying to claim? What are the features of the process that you're trying to claim? All of that. What is the experimental detail? Completely the method of it, the examples, the illustration, the test data, tables, all of it you're filing at the complete specification stage. Because if you're claiming property in your patent, the patent office will ask you clearly, I need to know how your property looks. What is the depth of your property? What is the nature of your property? And then, have you defined the boundary of your property? The claims will define the boundary of your property, so that you are not overlapping with someone else's property. You're not infringing on existing IP. Okay, so after provisional filing, within 12 months you must file for the complete specification. Otherwise, you will be losing the priority. And of course, after that, then there is examination. So at least early stage filing is important. Yeah. So you may not proceed with the complete specification filing. With the provisional itself, you can transfer your technology. Use the provisional number, put it into the agreement, and transfer it to the industry. If the industry is ready, you have no need to wait for the complete specification filing. Okay, you can actually transfer it to the. Suppose, let us say, an industry wants to buy away your technology. That may be also the very good stage. Suppose industry is not ready, proceed with complete specification filing. At that stage, you may get industry. So the IP filing prosecution is one part of it. The transfer of IP is the other part of it. Okay, so you have to gently balance that. Don't wait for IP to be in your hand, but the market is no longer there. Then it's no value taking IP, right? So you have to keep sight of both of these.
Yes, ma'am. One more was for the patent filing, which country we need to choose, and is there any criteria based on domain or something else?
Yeah. See, which country you need to choose depends on your technology has relevance to which market. It is like that. Okay. So if your technology has better market in the US, go for a only US filing. That is possible. Suppose, let's say your technology has multiple markets in Europe, in US also, in some other country also. Then you may want to use what we call the international filing route, which is called the route through the PCT route, the Patent Cooperation Treaty route, which enables you in one single window. That is, you go to the, let us say, Kolkata is our jurisdiction here, Kolkata Patent Office. If you go and file it at the Patent Office, Kolkata, and tell them that, look, transfer this to an international filing number, then they will get an INPCT number, which means single filing window. I am today filing at the Patent Office, Kolkata Patent Office. The same day is treated as though I have already gone and filed at EPO on the same day, USPTO on the same day, maybe Israel on the same day, China on the same day. So at least it saves you the filing cost. Okay, so that international filing procedure is also available. Later on, you can decide if you want to explore, let us say, US market only, EP market only, then go for a specific grant there. Okay, so, but many other cases, people don't go for international filing. They know that their market is only in the US, go for only US filing, go for only Japanese filing. That is also there.
Yes, ma'am. Another question related to if rather than developing a technology or a product, if a theory or an idea which already exists is prescribed in a new way, of a theory is elaborated in a new way, will it be patentable?
No, ideas are not patentable. Ideas are not patentable. The expression of ideas are patentable. And that expression should be concrete. That expression doesn't mean that, look, I have an idea, so I've written a nice document. Huh? I got a good idea, so today I've written 2 pages. Huh? And you can't go to the patent office and say, look, I have, please file for provisional. That's not the case. Okay. So when we say expression of an idea is patentable, that expression must go through the details of that particular domain in terms of the technical details of the experimentation, all of that. Okay. So that is what is the thing. Ideas are absolutely not patentable. You may have had a great dream of doing something well and good, but you have to put that into practice. You have to work on the idea. You have to look at developing a prototype in terms of the process or a product, uh, working of it, at least one working. Then yes, you are ready with the expression of it. And so therefore, expressions are only possible in terms of IP, not ideas. And remember, this is a very important question. So if you get an idea, don't go and write on Facebook. Don't go and write on social media. Don't send an Instagram. I mean, I do not know how Instagram works because I've never used it. But I know that there are various of these software, your web platforms where there's so much of communication. Remember, be responsible in your communication so far as IP is concerned. Any few phrases that you're adding, okay, in relation to an invention, remember, this is a small world. Someone is capturing that idea. Tomorrow, you cannot say they violated IP because you are the one who went and wrote it on a blog. You said that, well, the next area of research is this. I have developed this product. I think this can be customized to develop a thing. These things, please do not write on blogs. If you have a great idea, you incubate that into research. Get back to your lab or get back to the lab which can offer you space. Work on it. Don't write all these great ideas or technical solutions on a blog. Tomorrow, remember, there are people who are watching, capturing that, and they are filing for IP. Later on, you realize that, oh, look, I gave the idea and they worked on it and they got IP. Okay, so we bar inventors to go and write here and there. In fact, we tell them not to participate in competitions also and challenge grants. We tell them file IP first. Hackathon, you want to participate? Some entity has called you for a hackathon based on your initial proposal. We say file IP. Go with the provisional filing, so that they also will not violate. They'll respect your IP. Because remember, in all these hackathons, challenge grants, all of these, this is a place for harvesting IP. You may be releasing out all the IP, potential IP that you have, and someone else is in the future filing for IP, which you would have wanted to develop. So do not lose your IP.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
One more was regarding the software point of view. software has many version and upgrade on daily basis. Should I have to patent for each major version?
See, the versions of the software are the development of that particular code or whatever, right? Okay, those versions are available even generally. As I understand, they're available in the open source, all of it. See, the versions are the code which you are developing. I mean, I hope my understanding is very clear. The applications of the software are the ones which are patentable. So you are developing, you may need to tweak the code in order for you to develop the new application. Okay, the code development is another copyright. The version of it where you can take another copyright on that exists by way of creation, right? The version 1, version 2, you can say, okay, version 1 copyright, you can put your name and that particular year. Okay, that is a copyright. But if that version is used for developing a new application, that new application is patentable. So new versions, as my understanding very clearly goes, are copyrightable subject matter. That is a change of the code, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your wonderful talk. And we sincerely thank you all for attending this talk. IEEE YPAG team, we hopefully will arrange a similar kind of informative talk with Madam itself in future if possible. We'll see that in the upcoming days. Okay, ma'am. Thank you for your talk.
Sure.
I think we'll
thank
the
you.
meeting.
Thank you all, and wishing you all the best. It's a very small deliberation. If one has to talk on innovation, it may take really long time and many hours. But I hope it's been useful, and I appreciate your work, and I hope you can disseminate to this information to many of your other friends. Okay. Thank you all.